Hello, welcome back to the videos for the introduction to scripting in GIS for WVU, JOG 453 and 651. This is the second video for Chapter 3, which is Chapter 3 looking at control structures in general, giving more complex instructions to the computer. And in the previous video, the first one for the chapter, we saw if-then statements or conditional statements. This time we will look at loops and the ideas behind how they work. So a loop, if we just think of a flowchart and put a loop in it, then it kind of makes sense. So we have our start, and I will leave this blank for now. So in our loop, we have a series of statements. And we do those statements over and over again. That's the whole point of a loop, to repeat something. And when we're done with the loop, we then continue on with the rest of the code. Now, there are two different kinds of loops, and they have similar but somewhat different criteria for deciding when to do what's inside the loop and when to continue on to what is the rest of the code. So in the first example, we might have, say, a list of names. And for each person, for each name in that list, we then run our statements. So it could be things like for example, it could be certifying people for graduation. For every name of a person who has applied to graduate, check to make sure that they have met all of the requirements. When we have gone through that list and compiled those requirements and checked every name, we then continue on to the rest of the process. So in that case, it would be sending on to the college office, and that gets then sent on to the registrar's office of yes or no, did that person meet the requirements to graduate? That is a for loop. That's the name for there. And it says for either for every item in a list or for 10 iterations, do what is in that loop. So you can identify at the start of the loop how many times you're going to go through it, whether that's just a set number or the length of the list. But there are times when you might not be interested in that sort of thing, in completing the steps for every item in the list. Which brings us to the other kind of loop called the while loop. Now that could be so again, with the registration idea, we might have something where we're adding people to a class until the class is full. So now we go while this class is not full. So that's a conditional, basically a conditional loop. When that condition is true, the class is not full, we can go and we add a person. When it's false, we then go on to the rest of the code. So while our condition, again, this is something that would evaluate to a Boolean expression. While that expression is true, we do what's in the loop. As soon as it is false, then we switch over and we move on with the rest of the code. One thing to be careful of with the while loops is, what do? You need to make sure that at some point you're going to escape the loop. You cannot just have a case where it's going to always be true. If you do that, it will compile, it will run. The syntax will work out. However, the code will literally just keep running forever. It is called an infinite loop because you're in the loop and you would basically be doing it infinite times. After maybe a half hour to an hour, ArcGIS Pro will crash if you do this. But it will for a while look like it's just going on for infinity. And you won't be able to stop it. There's no way to interrupt it. You will just have to close the program. So be careful. Be careful about this infinite loop. Make sure that your condition is going to end up being false before you actually hit the run button. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there for a long time, not able to make much progress. So those are the two kinds of loops, for loops and while loops. Both of them repeat what is inside the code many times. And a for loop has that determined ahead of time. It's going to run it a set number of times or for every item in a list. Whereas the while loop will continue running the loop as long as the condition that it's checking remains true. And when that turns false, it leaves. So those are the kinds of loops. And the next video, looking ahead, we'll look at both if-then statements, the for loops and the while loops, the Python code, to see the both the differences and the similarities in how those are set up in Python, in how Python reads these kinds of control structures. So again, thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you at the next video.